Hi, today we're going to talk about meiosis and genetic diversity. And this is just an introduction, so we're not going to go very deep with the content, but we do want to review some very important terms and concepts that we're going to see repeatedly. So one of the phenomena studies that we're going to definitely be talking about, and I'll use my own personal example as we get deeper into the unit, is siblings. I have siblings. I have a sister and two brothers. And while we might look similar to each other, we don't look exactly the same because we're not identical twins, but we do share some similarities, and that's because we have meiosis to thank for that. So let's talk more about that, and we'll circle back to this concept of siblings and how our appearances are not identical, but similar. So what are the TEKS? Well, for this unit, we definitely are going to be zeroing in on this analyzing and evaluating the relationship of chromosome reduction, independent assortment, and crossing over, and how that leads to genetic variation. Let's talk about vocabulary, which is just the best way to really front load our unit. We're going to see these terms, we need to know these terms, so let's make sure that we don't have any misconceptions going in. And these are terms that should already be in your notebook. Gametes. Gametes are just sex cells. I've talked about egg and sperm cells before. You have a large gamete, your egg cell, and a small gamete, your sperm cell, in humans. And these each contain half the number of chromosomes. They're haploid. And gametes are the result of meiosis. So let's talk haploid. I already mentioned it before. Well, haploid cells contain one set of chromosomes. They are one copy of each chromosome. Most of your body cells have two copies of each chromosome, and we talked about that when we talked about mitosis. But meiosis is different than mitosis. Your haploid cells for meiosis are just one copy, just one set. And that's a big takeaway here. Haploid cells are your sex cells. They're egg and sperm. These cells are made during meiosis. So egg and sperm, haploid cells. Haploid for humans number is 23. So humans have 46 chromosomes, which means half your haploid count would be 23 chromosomes. Haploid cells carry one chromosome from each pair, not both. Why are these important? Well, haploid gametes are important because when an egg and sperm fuse during fertilization, we're combining 23 and 23 to give us 46. The correct diploid number is 46. If gametes weren't haploid, chromosome numbers would double every generation, and that would be very, very weird. So, in simple terms, haploid cells only have one set of chromosomes, half the usual amount, so that when the egg and sperm join, the baby ends up with the right amount of DNA. One way to think about this would be haploid cells are like one scoop of ice cream, and you need two scoops, one from mom, one from dad, to make a complete sundae, and that would be a diploid cell. So, let's talk about diploid cells. Well, diploid cells contain two sets of chromosomes. So, two sets of chromosomes, one set from each parent. You get one full set of chromosomes from your mother and one full set from your father. So your body cells have pairs of chromosomes. For example, in humans, there's 46 chromosomes in total, 23 pairs. 23 from mom, 23 from dad, which equals 26 in total, diploid. Diploid cells are your normal body cells. So diploid and somatic cells is how you might hear about them. Those would be your skin cells, your muscle cells, nerve cells, blood cells. These cells all have two sets of chromosomes. The 2N here means two copies of every chromosome. So N is the number of unique chromosomes. So 2N would be double that number because of the two sets. For humans, N equals 23 unique chromosomes. 2N equals 46, which is the diploid number. Why does this matter? Well, diploid cells are important because they keep the full genetic information needed for your body to grow, repair, and function. Gametes, your egg and sperm cells, on the other hand, are haploid. They're just N. So that when they combine, the zygote becomes diploid again, 2N. My favorite term, well, not actually, I like all of the terms. Homologous chromosomes are a pair of chromosomes, one from each parent, that carry genes for the same traits. So a pair of chromosomes, one from each parent that carry genes for the same trait, really just means you get chromosomes from both parents. Your mom gives you one chromosome in the pair, and dad gives you the matching chromosomes in the pair. And these two chromosomes match in size, shape, and the types of genes they carry. These matching chromosomes are called homologous chromosomes because they are like two versions of the same book with the same chapters. Sometimes there's different details inside those chapters. So, for example, both chromosomes have a gene for eye color, but mom's version might be brown and dad's version might be blue. It's the same gene, so the same gene would be eye color, but there's different versions. The alleles are different. So for example, for myself, I have green eyes. My father had green eyes, and my mother had brown eyes. So it's the same eye color is what we're talking about, but the alleles are going to be different. So homologous chromosomes, they carry genes for the same traits. So homologous chromosomes both have genes for things like eye color, hair type, height, blood type. They carry the same kinds of information, but the details can be different. So in simple terms, you have pairs of chromosomes, one from mom and one from dad, that carry the same kind of genes. They match, but they're not identical. So think of two recipes for chocolate chip cookies. Both recipes make cookies, both have the same ingredients listed, but one might use dark chocolate and the other might use milk chocolate. So same trait, different versions. Chromosome reduction. So this is a mechanism. Meiosis reduces chromosome number from diploid to haploid. So remember, we talked about the difference from diploid to haploid. Meiosis reduces the chromosome number because, well, your diploid cells, your 2N, have two sets of chromosomes, which means one set comes from mom, one set comes from dad. In humans, again, your diploid represents 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. Those are body cells, skin, muscle, nerve cells. Haploid cells, the N, have only one set of chromosomes, gametes, so those egg and sperm cells. An example in humans would be there's 23 chromosomes in haploids, so only one from each pair. Meiosis is the process that cuts the chromosome number in half. So a diploid cell, 2N, going through meiosis becomes 4 haploid gametes. This reduction is essential for sexual reproduction. Why the chromosome number must be cut in half? Well, if gametes, your egg and sperm cell, were diploid, fertilization would double the chromosome number every generation. So you'd go from 46 to 92 to 184 to 368 and so on. That wouldn't be survivable. So by making eggs and sperm haploid, fertilization restores the diploid number. So haploid egg plus haploid sperm makes a diploid zygote. So to make it as easy as to understand as possible, meiosis halves the number of chromosomes, so the baby gets the correct amount of DNA when the egg and sperm cell combine. A great way of thinking about this is imagine making a sandwich. One slice of bread equals mom's chromosomes, and one slice of bread equals dad's chromosomes. Together, you make one full sandwich. If each parent gave a whole sandwich, you'd end up with way too much. So, another mechanism would be independent assortment. Well, chromosomes line up randomly, creating genetic variation. This is how you get siblings who look different even though they have the same parents. So because chromosomes line up randomly, creating that genetic variation, it really just means that during meiosis 1, in metaphase 1, homologous chromosomes pairs are going to line up in the middle of the cell. But there's no set pattern. They don't line up mom, dad, mom, dad, mom, dad. Instead, the orientation is completely random. Each chromosome pair can flip either way. For example, for one pair, the mom's chromosomes might be on the left and the dad's might be on the right. But for another pair, it could be the opposite. This random lineup is called independent assortment, which shows you how clever us science people are. We like to name things exactly what they are. So when the cell divides, different combinations go into the gametes because the chromosome pairs line up differently each time. Gamete 1 might get more from mom chromosomes, and gamete 2 might get a different mix. Gamete 3, an entirely different mix as well. Same for gamete 4, a totally different combination. Every gamete is unique. So this is how, unless you're an identical twin, fraternal twins are going to have this random, this independent assortment as well. That's why fraternal twins are not looking exactly alike, even though they share the same birthday. This genetic variation is coming because of this random lineup. You get millions of possible chromosome combinations, unique gametes, offspring with different combinations of traits, and this is one reason siblings look different. A great analogy, in my opinion, would be imagine 23 pairs of socks. When you throw them into a basket without organizing, you get a totally random mix each time. Gametes work the same way. Random assortment leads to endless combinations. So, chromosomes don't line up in a set pattern during meiosis. Their random arrangement leads to unique combinations of genes in every gamete. All right, so let's talk about another really neat mechanism called crossing over. Homologous chromosomes exchange DNA segments during prophase 1. Well, what does that mean? Well, homologous chromosomes are those matching chromosome pairs. You have two versions of each chromosome, one from your mom, one from your dad. And these matching pairs are called homologous chromosomes. They carry the same kinds of genes, like eye color, height, hair type, but possibly different versions of those genes. For example, my mom's chromosome had the gene for brown eyes. My dad's chromosome had the gene for green eyes. They are still homologous, but they're different. So during prophase 1 of meiosis, the pairs come together. The homologous chromosomes line up side by side, and this is a special step only in meiosis, not mitosis. They exchange DNA segments, so while paired up, they swap pieces of DNA with each other, and that process is called crossing over. One way to think about this is to imagine two strings of beads, chromosomes, and they're trading beads between each other. Why does this matter? Well, when they exchange segments, new combinations of genes are created. Each gamete gets a unique mix. This increases genetic variation. So this is another reason siblings look different even though they have the same parents. One way to think about this is think during meiosis, matching chromosomes trade small pieces of DNA, creating new combinations of traits before they separate into gametes. So an example would be homologous chromosomes both have a hair color gene. Mom's might be for dark hair and dad's might be for light hair. I have darker brown hair. My husband has a lighter color hair. And guess what? All three of our children have hair that is not as dark as mine. They all skewed more towards my husband's lighter color. So Sometimes that happens with siblings. But it's entirely possible that this same combination, this me and my husband, we could have created a child with hair as dark as mine. So it's just neat that during crossing over, they may swap these segments, but the final chromosomes will always have mixed versions. So if you haven't gotten it yet, let's talk a little bit more about why sexual reproduction increases variation. Well, combining two unique gametes creates diverse offspring, which really just means your gametes, remember your egg and sperm, gametes are sex cells, and they are haploid, meaning they only carry one set of chromosomes, the egg from the mother, the sperm from the father. Each one carries a different mix of genes. Every gamete is unique. During meiosis, chromosomes reduce. You have independent assortment where you have some different variations happening. You also have crossing over. All of this mixes and shuffles the DNA. So this means no two eggs are the same and no two sperm are the same. And each gamete has a different combination of genes. When a random egg meets a random sperm, the fertilized egg, the zygote, gets half the DNA from the egg and half the DNA from the sperm. Because both gametes are unique, the offspring gets a brand new combination of traits. This is why siblings can look very different, even with the same parents. So in simpler terms, each parent contributes one unique set of genetic information. When those two sets come together, they create a new, never-before-seen mix of traits. All right, what's the importance of variation? We have talked previously about certain organisms, whether eukaryotic or prokaryotic, that make genetic copies of themselves. We don't do that, and a lot of creatures rely on genetic variation because it has some benefits. So genetic variation is just differences in traits, and that means individuals in a population are not all the same. So examples of variations would be different hair or fur colors, different immune system strengths, different sizes, speeds, or behaviors. Variation is like having a mixed toolbox instead of 20 hammers in the same toolbox. Variation can improve survival. So if the environment changes because of a new predator, a disease, or temperature, even food supply changes, not all individuals will respond the same way because they have different traits. Some individuals will naturally have traits that help them survive better. For example, if a disease spreads, some individuals may have genetic resistance. These survive and reproduce, even though others in the population might die from that same disease. Variation helps populations stay stable over time. Because some individuals survive challenges, the population doesn't all die out, and they can recover more quickly. Essentially, they adapt to new conditions because of this variation. Populations with low variation, where everyone is similar, they're at higher risk of being wiped out by disease, struggling with climate changes, even failing to adapt when resources change. So, to summarize, genetic variation acts like insurance for a population. If something bad happens, at least some individuals will have the right traits to survive, reproduce, and keep the population going. So, let's recap. We have three mechanisms that produce unique gametes and genetic variation. We have chromosome reduction, independent assortment, and crossing over. And all three of these lead to that really neat genetic variation that helps keep our population, for humans, stable and diverse. Let's make sure we don't have a misconception here. Is meiosis the same as mitosis? No. So we have to stop thinking about only one way. And hopefully we feel a little bit more confident going into this because we have a strong background with mitosis. And we talked about PMAT and all the stages. Well, meiosis is going to be similar. We're going to use a lot of what we already learned with mitosis to help ground our new learning. So this is just the basics. I can't wait to talk more about meiosis with the rest of you later. Have a great day.